Britain is facing a very crucial moment in history. In just a few weeks' time, everyone will be voting to either stay or leave the EU. But how important is this decision? What will Britain become after this referendum? Will it become stronger or will it crumble? In this documentary, you'll find out how much power the public has, but also how it affects us young voters. And what will Britain become after the Brexit? Why do you think it is important to vote in an election or referendum?
I think one of the reasons is even if you don't agree with the policies, one of the things that voting can do is it gives you the least worst option because whether you vote or not, the changes are still going to happen. So you may as well go for the least worst option so you can have at least that much difference to make.
Also that people know a lot more than they already do about politics, considering it is going to decide our futures and things, and the futures, etc. So therefore I think people need to know what they're voting for and then use the power that they probably don't realise they have through voting, really, because I think a lot of people believe it won't make a difference when I think it will.
How many friends do you know that have knowledge about political affairs?
I think probably around 40% of my friends are quite expert, have a lot of expertise in politics.
4 in total, I'd say.
Right, so it's not that much?
Not that many, no.
Is there a way UK politicians can convince younger generations to vote in elections or referendums?
It's really difficult because the EU is not exactly the most exciting topic, especially for young people. It's quite difficult to make them understand what the EU is, how important it is, how it affects their everyday lives. Considering they're quite a lot older than young people, it's very difficult to try and communicate that message when you're dealing with people who aren't interested.
People between the ages of 18 to 24 had a turnout of less than 50% in the past 20 years of elections, and the total turnout of 2015 elections were just 66.1%. Although the public makes the decision, only 2/3 actually vote, and only 1/5 of voters are from the youth. Do you know any EU laws?
Not off the top of my head, no.
A Bill of Rights, that's what the Conservative government are trying to push for in this country at the moment, I think.
Human rights, they have like the human rights law, I think. They have financial laws, social, economic and environmental sort of laws that they introduce as sort of restrictions to what we can do in this country.
I think it's quite funny some of the things that some of the media come up with, like they always come out with silly interpretations of what EU laws mean, like determining how straight a banana has to be before it's allowed in the shop or allowed to be sold. There's that, and what kind of vacuum cleaner you can have. I've seen that as well. It's a bit silly. There's a lot of misrepresentation about EU laws, but at the end of the day I think they're there to protect us largely and help us as consumers just get on without any kind of manipulation, if you like.
What you see on screen are the categories of the legislations made by the EU. If you want to see them in more detail, please follow the link in the description below. In 2015, the UK paid 13 billion euros, which is the equivalent of 10 billion pounds, towards the EU with a return of 4.5 billion, and it was the second highest contributing country in the EU that year. After hearing this information, do you think Britain gets treated differently or unfairly by other European countries?
It's sort of a misrepresented number because people don't look into what we get from the money that we put into the EU and what we get in return. I think the media tries to portray it as though we get treated unfairly, especially sort of like the Eurosceptic sector. But I don't think, the EU's there to sort of treat all countries differently. Well, all countries equally in the EU, and I think that's sort of an important thing, and that's sort of why the EU runs.
Yeah, it's according to how other countries are doing. So obviously, Britain's doing a lot better off than a lot of the other EU countries, and I think we have a responsibility as part of the EU to contribute. It's not just about the money, like you said. We contributed £10 billion. and we only got, was it 4 billion?
4.5 billion euros in return.
But that's just money. I mean, what about all the schemes that we get? I mean, in this college, in the TRC, we get money from the European Social Fund. There's all these things that the EU funds and that all of us take for granted, but all we seem to obsess about is just getting the money back. That's not what the EU is about. I think it's great that we put in and we contribute money, and that can go to other countries to help them develop. And you know, we get some of it back through lots of different schemes, and our science industry is massively funded by the European Union. And as you'll see, there was a letter recently released by lots of different scientists, including Stephen Hawking, saying that if we left the EU, it would be devastating for science. So, you know, that money is vital.
After the Second World War, Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands formed an alliance that made each country form new laws that would benefit everyone. Over the years, many other countries in Europe have joined the EU, and as of 2016, 28 countries from this political bond has improved movements of services and people in many nations.
Almost every European country wants Britain to remain in the EU. Why do you think that is?
Actually, smaller countries benefit more from the EU than Britain, and so Britain leaving would hurt their economy.
It may be because that the UK are quite a strong country on their own, perhaps, and they feel that we are better off in the EU to sort of support a lot of other people who may be less successful, less economically developed countries, for example, that are in the EU. We may be a sort of role model for them to some degree, and for us staying in the EU, that's how they may look at us. Or it may be that they think there's a sort of safety in numbers aspect to it.
I think as well, it would be a radical shift, and a lot of them may see it as quite revolutionary in the sense that it's something that wouldn't be expected, and it would be a lot of changes within the EU that would happen as a result that they may not be prepared for.
UK production, rather than import goods from Spain, Italy or Eastern Europe?
Well, China is our 4th biggest trade partner anyway, and we're still in the European Union. I think it's a bit of a myth to say, oh, we can't trade with other countries. It's just not true. I think out of the top 5, 3 of our biggest trade partners are not members of the European Union. So, you know, being part of the EU does not stop us from working with other countries and cooperating with them. And leaving the EU just puts the special partnership that we have with the 28 countries at risk. I just don't see the point in risking it.
But now let's move on to a subject which has caused so many headlines in the past few years, but especially in the past few months: immigration.
Over 100,000 refugees from a variety of countries are seeking asylum in the UK, whereas countries like Sweden and Germany have 300,000 to 500,000 refugees knocking at their door. After hearing this information, do you think Britain is doing its best at handling this refugee crisis?
In my opinion, I think it's doing quite well, or better than I think a lot of people think that Britain is doing. I think one of the problems is that I don't think I think it's been handled obviously very badly by Germany, who have not had many security checks. In my opinion, I do want people to claim asylum if they're worthy of it, but I think the problem is that there hasn't been an official route to do it, and so I think a more official route and that people can take should be used to make sure that you find the right people to take in, because currently it's very unorganized. So if there was a correct way of doing it, I'd be very for it, but I think it's being done quite badly right now.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think loads of countries are in it together. The world's in it. You know, everyone in the world's in it together. I don't know if things would change if we left the EU. I don't know if we are doing our best, to be honest. But I think a lot of what could be done could be carried out in overseas territory and building infrastructure over there and things, so that people can be supported at in their own homes and tackling the problem there.
Do you think Britain should close its borders?
Straight
No,
up no.
it's just silly to think that if you close your borders and you stop people coming in, that all the problems are going to be solved and everything's going to go away. The fact is, a lot of the problems that people who want the borders to be shut, the problems that they worry about are things like housing, the NHS, things like that. That is a symptom. The problems that we have now in those places are a symptom of the government, the British government, that we have right now underfunding our services. And not building enough houses. That's not the EU's fault, and that's not migrants' fault. They come here, and the average migrant creates more jobs than they take, and they build more houses than they take for their families as well. It's ludicrous. You know, this country was built on migration from other countries, so what's the problem? We've always whinged about migrants, but actually we're fine.
If Britain leaves the EU, over 300,000 jobs will be lost in terms of EU services. Billions of pounds will be lost in trade, and the UK debt will increase for at least 10 years before it can start declining. This is a very important referendum, as you can see. And it is important to vote, especially for the younger generations, as they will live the consequences of the turnout of this year.
If the UK were to leave, what do you think will be the global impact?
I think in the short term it would affect jobs in the UK a lot. I think it always would do if you leave something as big as the EU. So I think in the short term it'd be quite bad. But in the long term, I think there will be economic benefit to the UK. And I think a lot of EU nations may also look at the example of the UK, and they may, you know, in a few years, they may find that the UK is successful and may even want to leave themselves, which may almost cause a shockwave around the EU and Europe. So I think that's my opinion on what will happen.
It may cause some sort of controversy around the world, you know, with it not necessarily a political uprising or, you know, just some sort of controversy around the world that we're now independent. It may cause friction, may cause some trade links to close off, maybe new ones to form as well. I'm not entirely sure what would happen on a global scale, but I'm not convinced that it would be anything massive just yet.
And it's very, very worrying that actually this referendum is not about politicians and it's not about this kind of political game. This is very serious, and it's just asking a question in or out, and it will determine our future. We are young people, and effectively this referendum, if young people don't go out and vote, you're going to be having the older generations voting on a country that they are leaving behind for us, and that scares me slightly. Yeah.
People from the ages of 18 to 25, only 35% of people who are allowed to vote between those ages actually did end up voting. Compared to other ages, from 26 and onwards, it was over 50%. And do you think that's an alarming figure?
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely terrifying, and like I say, it makes me a bit upset really that actually the older generations are dictating what kind of lives young people lead. And that's not to say that obviously all old people are wrong, but young people need to vote because they're not being represented, and they say, oh, we're not represented by Parliament, we're not represented by the politicians, they're all in it for themselves. And to a certain extent that may be true of some politicians, but actually if you just sit on the sidelines and don't get involved, don't vote, what else is that going to do? You're just going to leave all the other people, all the other groups who do vote to get the politicians to represent them, and you are going to continue being ignored. You need to vote.
Do you think Britain should leave or not?
No, shouldn't leave.
It's too risky.
In the long term, I think we're better off in the EU, but I don't think that the deal we have at the moment is quite perhaps what we asked for.
I believe it should, yes.
Thanks.
The EU wants us to stay. 90% of politicians in the UK want us to stay. But what will you decide? To leave or to stay? I hope this documentary has helped you understand how important this referendum is and how it will make history, but also how it will affect us for years to come.